dear students, welcome to the discussion of your science and technology questions of your UPSC GS3 paper. As we had earlier seen in the environment discussion, the questions asked in science and technology were fairly straight, and there's not a lot of confusion that was happening over there, because if you knew the points to write, you had good content for it, you would score very well in this region. Now coming on to the questions, as predicted, we had questions on Chandrayaan, we have questions on the microorganisms, again one area that was there in this year's prelims also. So without much delay, let's look into the first question. The first question reads as: introduce the concept of artificial intelligence. How does artificial intelligence help clinical diagnosis? Do you perceive any threat to privacy of the individual in the use of AI in healthcare? There are three parts to the question, but don't get over committed to any part in this, because all the three parts have to be dealt with somewhat an equal importance which is there. We have to start with what the idea of artificial intelligence is. Artificial intelligence is basically the simulation of human intelligence process. To put it in basic terms, it is machines imitating human intelligence process which is there, and in doing this they have used several aspects like natural language processing, speech recognition, machine vision, etc. This is the aspect of artificial intelligence. So you can introduce as to how artificial intelligence, the different purposes of it, the uses of it. It can be used in healthcare, traffic, communication, data storage, several applications of it. Then you go on to the healthcare and specifically the medical diagnosis part. They are not asking about the entire healthcare in the first part. They are asking only about clinical diagnosis. So don't make the mistake of writing so many points under that area. Deal with medical diagnosis. So what exactly is medical diagnosis? Medical diagnosis is basically the process of you look into the different medical conditions of a patient. You look into the different symptoms of the patient, do certain tests regarding it, and then finally you determine the cause of a medical problem. And once you determine the cause, you give what is the idea for an effective treatment. This is the idea of medical diagnosis. So establish that, and here then you go about what AI can do in this field. You will see that any of your artificial intelligence algorithms which are there, what they can do is they can analyze your different medical images. So you can analyze the different medical images like X-rays, MRIs, etc. and therefore help, like for example, whichever is the healthcare provider in identifying what is the disease correctly. So just like, for example, what one doctor will be doing when the work is given to AI, they will be able to do it at a much more faster rate. AI can analyze large amounts of patient data, including your 2D, 3D imaging, biosignals, which are ECG, EEG, EMG, any of these signals, along with your temperature, heart rate. So what happens is, whatever the doctor, a singular doctor can do, or an expert of group of doctors can do, AI can multiply the effort involved over there. So more effort. Then finally, because AI can see the patterns across the board of things, they will be able to much more in a better manner predict what exactly could be the problematic cause. So it can be more accurate. So my point over here is, when you write the different impact on clinical diagnosis, you should be not just writing and going. You should show as to how it is a better thing. You have faster, the more effort which is there, the more accurate reading which is there, the different kinds of data, healthcare providers that can be there. And over the time, you can even if you do not have currently a disease, using AI, you can predict the probability of diseases. Not only that, once you predict the probability of diseases, you can actually, for example, if there are 3-4 different modes of treatment associated with it, you can use the AI and be like, okay, which of these affect or which of these will have an impact on this. So in this manner, you can simulate the effect on each of these. You don't have to actually try out all the medicines on the patient. You can have your automated simulations which are there, which can actually equip you to see the effect of the medicine on different categories of data, which has human biosignal involved in it. So in this manner, you can determine which course of treatment is also better. Now, the next part of the question comes as to if any privacy concern is there. So it's your perception that is asked, but don't ever say, yeah, I do think, but understand the fact that yes, there is a privacy concern involved over there, because most of the hospitals take up all the patient data over there, and it can be even anonymous data which is there, but then thereafter they share or sell it for the development of further artificial intelligence. Now what happens is this can pose a risk to patient privacy, because all the patient data, even if it's in an anonymized form, you can actually make it easier to re-identify patients from de-identified data. So that is also something AI is doing. AI is not only collecting the data, even if it's anonymous data, based on the data that they get, they can throw back or extrapolate into understanding who this patient would be. So that actually poses a risk to the patient privacy. Now, if the data of it gets into some kind of a cyber security threat and it gets leaked, that is also causing a threat to patient privacy. Then further, if you look at it, employment discrimination can happen. Employees, see, you always assume that your health data is something that is very private to you. But then what if now for a particular job, they want a person who can sit awake all at night? So then what happens is they will be looking into your stats, your vital stats and everything, and you can be discriminated on several grounds based on this. Further, if it gets even worse, you can be genetically profiled, because your data, health data which is there, for example, if you're someone who's prone to heart disease, they will not give you a project that involves so many things which is there, much more stressful things which is there. So in this manner, what would happen is there will be a discrimination sort of a thing, and if this data reaches into the wrong hands, which is maybe a drug company or an advertising firm, what they are likely to do is that they would be likely to sell or keep you exposed to more healthcare products of this manner, which basically means that your health data has now become like just a data set to target you for commercial activities. So increased long-term healthcare costs are more likely to occur. The lack of consent in using all of this is very, very shocking. One example that comes to my mind is few years ago, Facebook had launched a suicide prevention thing. Like, for example, if it come features in your this thing, so what they've done is they've analyzed the posts that you have put out. They've looked into data surrounding it, and they give you the suicide helpline number based on what you've done or what you've put out. Now, it's a good measure on one aspect, because people who need help will seek out for it, but it goes into thinking as to how did Facebook do this, which basically means Facebook knows as to all this data that is collected from us will be in the sense of a mental health disease which is there. Today they showed a suicide helpline. What if tomorrow they can send you targeted ads for a particular kind of medicine to treat you? What if they can show you something else which is there? So which basically means that this kind of thing, without proper laws and regulations, is bound to affect patient privacy. So that is the conclusion of it. So if India has to, or if any country has to take good measures with respect to this, one of the first steps would be to improve upon the rules and regulations associated with this sector. Moving on to the next question, discuss several ways in which Microorganisms can help in meeting the current fuel shortage. So microorganisms and fuel shortage is the point. You will see over here that, see, this is specifically in relation to one or few technologies which is there. Let's discuss it in detail. See, when you look, I have put an introduction line over there. The depletion of oil resources, increasing global energy demand, the current low yet unpredictable price of oil, and increasing maturity of many oil fields have driven the need for development of oil recovery technologies that are less costly and, where possible, much more environmentally compatible. So understand, we are facing a shortage of oil, and we need to find ways that where we can trap oil in a much more better manner. Okay, so this can be used as a very, big picture introduction line which is there. Now, one of the first technologies that they will be looking for as a keyword in this is the term microbial enhanced oil recovery, MOER. Microbial enhanced oil recovery is a very attractive alternate oil recovery approach where 50% of the residual oil in your land or oil fields can be recovered using microorganisms. When they do it in this manner, what happens is, for example, in a site where you know there is a presence of oil, you must have heard about the term enhanced oil recovery, right? In enhanced oil recovery, the third step is actually microbial. And they found that this microbial one was more effective. So why have the entire process? We can just focus on microbial enhanced oil recovery. And thus they came up with this technology which is there. So here you will see that here when you put out microorganisms over here, you will see that any biologically surface active components which are there, they do not, this microorganisms tries to break it down, and in that process what is going to happen is this energy can be captured or the fuel can be captured. So here you will see that because of this aspect you can capture the residual oil. Added on to that, this surface which is over there or this microorganisms which are over there, they do not require any so much of external stimulus, which means to extract oil you don't need to supply further oil or energy over there. Okay, in the normal systems what happens is, if I want to tap in oil from some area, I need to use certain technology which is your fracking and everything, wherein I'll have to give energy to get fuel resources. But here, because I'm using microorganisms and the technology doesn't involve a high energy process, what is going to happen? I do not require vast energy inputs. Because vast energy inputs are not required, the global crude oil prices will also not be affected because of this. Okay, so that is one major aspect that has to be mentioned in this question. Then moving on to certain other category of bacteria like your methanogens. Methanogens, as we had previously also discussed, are microorganisms that can produce your metabolic byproduct like methane and everything in hypoxic conditions, which means that when you have certain areas or certain biomass related things, if you are using microorganisms over there, from them you can create your methane, and methane can be used as a fuel. So you have your natural gas and everything, so methanogens can be used in that manner. Then moving on to bioremediation techniques. So as we had earlier also discussed, when you have oil spills and oil areas and everything, when you have microorganisms that are going and trying to break down these things, what basically happens is you have oil, which is a hydrocarbon. Microorganism breaks it into simpler hydrocarbons. These can be actually trapped and purified and further used as oil. So you can mention all of these things. I do feel even if you're not familiar with MOER, you would know about methanogens and bioremediation. But in that case, try getting more. This is not a question where you can fill in with so many points, but then using this idea. For example, there is something called as your algae, which are breaking down plastic to fuel. So all of these current affairs that you hear, you can incorporate even if you do not know the MOER technology which is there. But if you do know that, that would be one of the primary points that you have to mention in this question. Moving on to the last question from your science and tech. It's a very detailed 15 marker, but thankfully or fortunately for those who wrote this exam, each of these parts, which there's a very clear division with respect to what is expected from you in this question. What is the main task of India's third moon mission, which could not be achieved in its earlier mission? That is the first part. List the countries that have achieved this task. Second part. Introduce the subsystems in the spacecraft launched, and that is the third part. And the fourth part is explain the role of the Virtual Launch Control Center at the Vikram Sarabhai Space Center, which contributed to the successful launch from Sriharikota. That is the fourth part. You do realize one thing, if this question has been asked and the successful launch has been asked, you do know that the time that this question paper was somehow put in. This is July-August time, where because the launch of this was happening very recently itself. So you do know that it's not that early that the UPSC mains paper is being put, even if you look at the Libyan disaster related dam failure aspect also. Anyway, coming to this question, the first part you have to mention Chandrayaan 3 is a follow-on mission to Chandrayaan 2, which is the lunar mission of India. The primary aim of Chandrayaan 3 is to demonstrate safe and soft landing on lunar surface, to demonstrate rover roving on the moon, and to conduct in situ scientific experiments. It's not just necessary that you have to mention this, but you have to also show in Chandrayaan 2, the aspects that we could not achieve was both the landing and the rover part. We were successful in the orbiter part, but the lander and the rover part we could not do. Okay, but here we have successfully done this. So this has to be explicitly mentioned in the answer. Then you move on to the second part of the question, which says India now is joined the very light club of USA, Russia and China, which are one of the few countries to successfully land on the moon. Again, there exert and explicitly mention that we are in a light club of successfully landing on the moon, but we are the first country or national mission to soft land on the lunar south pole. That is a region that has never been explored before. So this is one of the biggest achievements of Chandrayaan 3. So you have to mention that specifically in this answer. Now moving on to the third part of the question. See, you have 3 lander payloads and 3 rover payloads. I have always told students whenever there is something like this, you have to compare it with from the ISRO site. You will see that there is a Ramba LP, which is basically to measure any kind of energy or electron density on the moon, which is there. There is a CHAST, which is Chandra Surface Thermophysical Experiment, to understand the thermal properties of the moon. There is an ILSA, which is trying to understand the crust and the mantle region of the moon. From the rover side, you have an APXS, which is an alpha particle X-ray spectrometer, which is to determine the lunar soil and the rock structuring which is there. If there is magnesium, aluminum, silicon, potassium, all of these things are going to be studied. There is a LIBS, which is laser induced breakdown spectroscope, again to understand the composition of minerals on the lunar surface. And then there's a SHAPE thing, which is spectropolarimetry of habitable planet Earth. This is primarily to understand if there is, for example, if there is any other planet that in the near habitable region which can be actually inhabited by us. So these are the payloads from the lander side and the rover side. Even if you do not know the full names of it or anything, you should have at least a rough idea and the functions of it. So I hope those who wrote it also have this idea, because see, it was a much expected question. You had to be prepared on this question. It was from the time Chandrayaan and Gaganyaan were declared. This is an expected question for UPSC. Moving on to the final part of the question. Now see, we have something called as the Virtual Launch Control Center. You do understand Sriharikota is in Andhra, but the virtual launch control center, which is at the VSSC, it is in Trivandrum, which is there, Thiruvananthapuram. The VLCC, which is there, primarily what it does is, this was actually started at the time of the corona time, wherein in Sriharikota is where the launches were happening. But every single time there used to be a launch, we needed scientists to be going to Sriharikota. During the corona time, that was something that was not feasible because the movement of human personnel was quite difficult. It is at that point where in Trivandrum they started something called as a virtual launch control center, where scientists would be sitting here but they would be remotely operating the satellite functions and the launch functions, etc. So we kept the organization kept that body even after our corona period, because it was seen to be widely beneficial. So even in the Chandrayaan-3 mission, we had your virtual launch control center working. You will see over here that there is the powerful LV-M3 launch vehicle which was going out over there. All the system checkouts of it, including the electronics, actuators and commands, everything was carried out from the VLCC center. They were the ones that made sure all of that was operating well. This actually helped the space agency reduce the movement of personnel to Sriharikota, and it also you can have all the experts needed located at two different places. So this actually has led to the successful launches of a lot of missions, and now to add to it, even Chandrayaan-3. So this is the purpose of it. You can mention about the corona time because it shows that you have been following the news related to it, but show that in Chandrayaan-3, all of the actual motors or all of these elements, electronics related to it, the checking of all of it was done remotely in Trivandrum. So even later on, if you look at it, be it through our Gaganyaan mission or anything, when we need to have this remote access, we can use your VLCC for this purpose. So I hope the science and tech paper was very direct, very fairly easy, I would say. If you are familiar with the concepts, you could easily attend all these 3 questions. I hope you all who wrote the exam have attended it well, and who are new to the UPSC mains are probably not shocked at all the questions. I hope your preparation is on the right track when you see these questions also. Until we meet next time, take care and happy learning.